Good evening and welcome. Welcome to our 9th annual Real Estate Hall of Fame event. I wish to personally thank everybody for being here at the DeYoung tonight. It's really a pleasure to see everybody. You've traveled far. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Wayne Brandt. I am the chairman of Spire, and on behalf of, thank you. Didn't expect that. But on behalf of the board of directors, I wish to personally welcome, specifically the friends and most importantly, the family of our honorees here tonight. It's great to have you here. And this is really a big honor. It's a big deal. And it's actually one of the, I'm just very proud to be part of this. You understand, this is probably one of the most important tasks that Spire does is select our honorees. There's a very long list of very prominent leaders in our industry, probably 30 that we have to select from each year. And I'm very proud that this year we have selected 3 honorees that are absolutely exceptional. We have 2 that come from the great state of Hawaii that were part of the operations, the founding, the growth of the Outrigger Enterprises Group. David Carey, class of 77, Dr. Richard Kelley, class of 55, and they have promised me that they will do a hula dance later. I don't know. Dr. Kelley. Our third honoree is Ed Friedrichs, who class of 65. Ed is our first architect, and he's here. He joined Gensler and rose over the years to become CEO of Gensler, one of the premier, preeminent design firms internationally. So tonight we're going to honor these 3 wonderful gentlemen, and thank you all for being here. Last year, thank you. Last year, we hosted this event. We had a very successful event here at the DeYoung. We honored Chip Conley, Susan Meny, and I've been involved with Spire for over 7 years now. And this is probably, what I most look forward to is honoring the many business accomplishments that our honorees have accomplished. But more importantly, it's really about showing for their families, the accomplishments that they've had civically, privately, with their families and so forth. And I'm always impressed with all of our honorees, just how strong their values are, how strong their ethics are, their vision, and most of all, that these honorees are so humble and authentic, and they're very approachable. So thank you all for being here. These are wonderful leadership qualities, and that's why they're being honored here tonight. So thank you. So what is Spire? Just very briefly, some of you are not familiar with our organization, what it is and what we do. And we started this organization 9 years ago. Our founders, it was a very kind of homespun, it started at Liberty Cafe, which was a group of folks got together who were passionate about real estate, passionate about Stanford. And today our organization has grown to over 3,000 members. And we serve, there's really 3 purposes for Spire that we serve: real estate education, student outreach, and alumni connectivity. And so this last year we gave $35,000 to student projects. We hosted 22 events nationally to connect our alums. And then most recently, 2 weeks ago, we had our annual SREC conference on campus at Stanford for a full day and a half, which I think is the preeminent real estate conference in the country. I'm obviously biased, but very successful. And we welcome everybody's participation. We do a lot, and in order to do a lot, we need a lot of help. And we have a full-time staff to help us execute. And our staff is incredible, and I wish to recognize them, all their hard work. Again, they plan and execute everything that's here tonight, our 22 events. And I'd like, Diane and Urzu, are you here? Can you stand up? I'd like to recognize Diane Perro and Arizu Benet. These 2 ladies are absolutely a delight to work with and do all the heavy lifting for Spire, and they do so much more. I enjoy your friendship, and thank you so much for all your hard work. I'd also like to recognize we have a few Hall of Famers who have formally been inducted who are here today. We have just a treasure chest of honorees that have been inducted. And here tonight, we'd also like to recognize Susan Meny, Fred Allen, and Bill Tooley. If you recall, Susan was the first woman inducted into our Hall of Fame last year. Thank you all for attending, and I want to recognize our honorees. Next, just very quickly, I'd like to also recognize our sponsors. Without them, this program would be really, really tough to pull off. At the Premier Core Partner level, Coup Finance. At their founding core partner, Alan Matkins. At the core partner level, AEI Consulting. And a big thank you to all the other sponsors at the key man level and the general partner level, and all of you that have contributed tickets and bought advertisements and contributed for tonight's event. Thank you all for your corporate sponsorship. It's what allows us to move forward. And then lastly, I'd just like to thank my board and, of course, David Butler, President. He and I have become very close. There's we have a lot of collegiality at our board. We have 21 members on our board, 1 student, and it's just a pleasure to work with these folks. They have insanely important day jobs, and whenever we ask them to do something for Spire, they drop everything like it's, their most important activity. But I just like to have a round of applause for this outstanding board of directors. They work very hard. Thank you so much. So I think one of the most special parts of these tributes is that this is a very intimate moment. Friends and families of our honorees have come here and traveled far to help present and honor their family members. And that's a very special way to introduce our honorees. And we're first going to start with Anne Marie Brown, daughter of Richard Kelley, and Shannon Carey, daughter of David Carey, to honor their fathers. Would you please come to the stage? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Anne Marie. I am otherwise known as Richard's youngest, right-handed, red-headed daughter. When you have 7 kids, you must get creative with their epithets. This award recognizes my father's contributions to the real estate fabric that shaped Hawaii. And indeed, his vision shaped Waikiki and the outer islands, and it brought thousands of visitors to the islands over the many decades that he served the tourism industry. But my father is so much more than his business accomplishments. First and foremost, he is a dad, and reminds us every day that his family is where his priorities lie. He is Papa, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather many times over. He's always ready with a story or a piece of advice. He is a loving husband to Linda Kelley, my mother, who traveled to countless meetings abroad and helped guide him along his journey. A multi-generational family business presents its own challenges, but my father did everything in his power to ensure that all of us were prepared to constantly address those challenges and survive not only as a business, but more importantly, as a family. My dad would always tell us that there was the family business, and then there was the business of the family. And it was paramount to him that we be able to shift from difficult boardroom discussions to surfing or dining with each other within a matter of moments. And as busy as he was developing and growing a corporation that spanned countries, decades, and generations, we always came first. My siblings can attest that anytime we call our father, he answers, even if it's in the middle of an important meeting, a speech, or the middle of the night in another time zone. He cares as deeply for his employees, associates, and friends as he does for all of us. If you've ever had the pleasure of dining with my father, you'll know that he has the ability to make you feel like you are the only person in the room. And he's likely to regale you with one of many fascinating anecdotes of building rafts from military aircraft parts from World War II, or the many characters that he met in the fledgling days of the hotel industry. Ask him about his John Wayne story if you have a chance. I am incredibly privileged to call Richard Kelley my father and present this video of his life. I love you, Daddy. Congrats on this incredible honor. I'm so very proud of you.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm Richard's granddaughter and David's daughter. And I'm so honored and humbled to be here speaking and introducing them tonight. I know how much it means to the two of them to be recognized by this organization and by the Stanford family, because even since I was really young, it was so clear to me how formative their time at Stanford was, which is why I was so compelled to follow in their hallowed footsteps to the farm myself in my own time. As Emery touched upon a little bit, growing up in a family business was a rare gift, and it was especially a privilege to see the fruitful partnership between Richard and David, and watching them build worlds together. Their shared core values took their partnership a long way, but I really think that the secret sauce in their partnership was in really the different brains they have and how they complemented and challenged one another. Among my father's many, many skills are his patience, intelligence, his ability to identify and hire really good people, and his creativity, way more than he'll ever admit. I mean, his ability to see creative solutions and to solve problems is breathtaking. I'm the youngest of 4, and so after all my siblings had left the nest, I had that rare gift of having my parents all to myself for a couple years. And in that time, my dad would drive me to school every day, just the 2 of us. We'd have a Starbucks mocha in each cup holder. I would teach him about all the cool new music, and he would speak very candidly about his work to me, which was such a huge, surreal world to me, whether it was a multi-million-dollar property bid in China or a C-suite hiring decision he was working through, or a late-night scuffle with the hotel security in Waikiki the night before. And I'm not really sure how old I was this particular day, but I have this super clear memory of the morning he explained to me one of Mark Twain's adages to the effect of, find a job you enjoy doing, and you'll never work a day in your life. David really found that in his career, and I think that's a really beautiful, rare thing. And it's an ideal I hold as a North Star in my own life today. So, Richard and David, congratulations on this award. I am utterly in awe of all you 2 have achieved, and I love you both so much. I hope you enjoy the tribute video you're about to see.
I don't think our objective was ever to make the company one of the fastest growing companies. I think it was really more of a, how do we operate as best we can given what's in front of us and take the opportunities when they come. Because of our experience, because of our background, we just knew it was right, and then it was a matter of pulling the trigger.
It was pretty magical to grow up here in Hawaii on the beach.
My parents came here to Hawaii in 1929 because my father lost his job in Los Angeles and he could not find a job in the Southern California area, so somebody said they heard that an architect named Pop Dickey needed a draftsman in Hawaii, and they exchanged a couple of cables, and all of a sudden they were on a boat headed for Hawaii.
Roy and Estelle gave us a great legacy. If you think about what kind of entrepreneurial guts it took to move to the territory of Hawaii and develop, I think he developed 16 or 19 buildings where he designed, built, paid for, all on his own. I mean, that's an extraordinary entrepreneurism that you just don't see in today's world.
My dad was born in the territory of Hawaii and lived a very, very different life. When he went to college, it was a completely different world for him to experience. And certainly going to Stanford the way he did was an incredible opportunity for him. And I'm sure it was life-changing for him in many ways. He was a medical doctor when I was growing up. That was his primary occupation, and he was starting to get pulled into the family business somewhat. So he was doing a little of this hotel work, but Much of my younger years, he was a pathologist at Queen's Hospital.
The entire Kelley family, they're hardworking people. They're very humble, down to earth, and they are extremely generous in the community, and they're just nice people, all of them.
Richard was a soft-spoken, low-key, very, very helpful to people, and he was that way to everyone, whether you were a maid or a millionaire.
My dad always valued education, and he always stressed the importance of getting an education for girls as well as boys.
He probably had more women working for him from early days in high-powered positions, and most of us who were women never forgot that.
As soon as we could reliably read, write, and count, we were working in the hotels during the summers. It might be folding towels, it might be counting checks, it might be doing reservations. We learned to really value the lowest levels of an operation, because that's what really counts. If the rooms aren't clean, if the air conditioner doesn't work, if a guest doesn't have a great front desk check-in, that colors their entire experience, not just at the hotel, but in Hawaii.
I was dating my wife in college, and she said, why don't you come out and visit? Her dad had a sailboat, I think he was a Cal 20, and went sailing off Waikiki, which was fabulous. And I said to him, this is lovely. I really like Hawaii. I wouldn't mind moving here after I graduate, at least for a while. Do you have any idea how I could get a job here? And he says, oh yeah, we have lots of jobs. We're happy to put you to work. And I had no idea at the time that the company had all these hotels. And so I came out here and began working for the hotels. My first job was on the front desk of one of the hotels, and then I did cashier, assistant manager, relief manager. I did time and reservations. And then after work, I started even going into doing stuff in the computer room. My father-in-law bought a new computer system at the time, and he said, hey, David, go figure out how this thing works.
David was always bright, he's very smart, he was motivated, he's always been very caring about other people. That certainly has played out in the business world, where he was always very concerned about his employees and the people he worked with. My father really took an entrepreneurial business that my grandparents had started and started professionalizing it. And then when David came in, he took it even further. He took it international.
Richard had a phenomenal capacity for details and how to find things, and I was probably more in the strategic and what's the right thing to do. So, he would have some ideas about how to get something or do something, and then it was my job to make sure that it got done. We just sort of had an understanding that we wouldn't do major things unless both of us agreed that it was the right thing to do.
A very close-knit family, from the very onstart with their grandfather, Roy Kelley, and Estelle Kelley, and then it moved on up. And I thought they were such a beautiful group of people. They sort of helped each other.
In Roy and Estelle's day, everybody felt like family. Richard then took it the next level up, because we went from probably 400 employees to 2,000 employees in Waikiki. And at one time, Richard interviewed every single employee who applied. We set about systematically creating an environment where people felt like they were part of the family. How does a small company like ours compete? What do we have that's different? Well, what we have is we're in Hawaii, and Hawaii has this really special culture here.
I think what Richard and David and the Kelley family set as a legacy, internally we call it the Outrigger Way, and it's a family values and a family-led approach. And it's so strong in the DNA of the company that you just can't extract it.
I felt that I was part of this huge organization, and I was treated so very well. And that's the reason why I remained for as long as I did, for 61 years.
When I started in 1995, it was primarily a company that was headquartered in Waikiki. Waikiki at the time had about 30,000 hotel rooms. Outrigger had about 1/4 of all the hotel rooms in Waikiki. Waikiki has half of the hotel rooms in the state. So it's a major force. And just walking around Waikiki, I began to realize there are millions and millions and millions of dollars that are transacted here every single day. That's when it really hits you about how important the visitor industry is to our economy.
We hadn't done any new renewal projects in Waikiki, and there were some things that need to be changed. And Outrigger was a major landowner along what is called Lure Street.
As we consolidated the property for the Waikiki Beach Walk, we had to buy each one of those little individual lots and trace down the ownership of that remnant of an old service road that ran in the back of it. It was a tremendous amount of work to do that and get it, negotiate with people that did have the rights.
So the feeling was, oh no, you're going to put more high-rises, more skyscrapers. We don't need that in Waikiki. So it was a novel concept at that time. But when I understood what David and his group were trying to do, I basically said, you know what, I'm on board.
And one of the first proposals that I made was to turn the whole area into a consolidated, uniform area. And I had a vision that we were going to make like a gaslight area out of it, with carriages going and gas lights on the lampposts and so forth. And over a period of time, that evolved into where the beach walk came out now. So it's sort of a uniform, pedestrian-friendly, far more open space.
We took this piece of property, it was about 8 acres. We had 3,100 rooms, which was more than 10% of all the hotel rooms in Waikiki. We had 11 hotels. We transformed it into a beautiful sparkling jewel that really led the renaissance of Waikiki. In rough numbers, the value of the properties went from about $250 million to about $1.7 billion in that one area.
They were visionary leaders. They saw that if they sat back and said, well, let's let someone else do it, it may not happen.
I have this vivid, spooky memory of sitting in a ballroom, and there are about 200 employees in front of us. And the news guy at 11 a.m. said this Category 5 storm is coming to Honolulu. 200-mile-an-hour winds. And I remember thinking, and I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach, if that storm comes here, we're done. If we have all our eggs in one basket, granted it's a great basket, it would be just prudent on behalf of the family to have some assets and operations in other places.
We bought property in Mauritius, the Maldives. We were in Phuket already. We were in Fiji in a couple of places. We signed contracts for Vietnam, Hainan Island, China. We were looking at Okinawa. We had been in Tahiti.
By the time we were finished, we had 15 properties in Australia, 3 in New Zealand. We had a management contract in Guam. We wanted to be in such a place so no one property, no one country, no one currency, or no one source market would take the company down.
Obviously, over the years, many challenges, 9/11, hurricane events, weather events. I mean, tourism is a challenging, business, and we're often at the mercy of those types of events. In the last, I think, year and a half, we had a false nuclear missile launch. We had multiple hurricanes. We had a volcano erupt on Hawaii Island. So Hawaii's not only a precarious place, but it's certainly not immune to potential disasters. So there's challenges, some that are predictable and some that are not.
Some folks might have pulled up stakes and left elsewhere. Now we could have done that. I like the fact that even though they were investing in the Pacific, I thought that was really important. Whether it was in Guam or in Fiji and some of these other areas, Hawaii was still home base for them.
He was the force behind getting a convention center for Hawaii. He was part for many years of the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, and he would travel all over the world to talk to others in the industry and bring that back to the industry in Hawaii.
I spend an awful lot of my time traveling around the world, so I will understand what's going on. And I still think that Waikiki is one of the most exciting, vibrant, pleasant, enjoyable resort areas in the world.
We've tried to instill in our own kids, just like my dad and mom instilled in us, that And education is really the key to so much in life.
I think in David's case, at his level of leadership, the expectation is to serve on board. So, among many commitments he's made is he's the chair of the Military Affairs Committee, which effectively is the highest ranking civilian in the state. And David was even hosting barbecues for members of the military in his backyard every October. And one of the biggest commitments he's made is to the Punahou School. I'd argue that Punahou K-12 is the most spectacular set of facilities in the world for a K-12 type of undergraduate program. And he actually put that into motion and drove the process from the grounds, the facilities themselves.
They've reached out to areas throughout Oahu where folks come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they've cast that wide net to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to have the finest education.
Dr. Kelley, you have had a profound, extraordinary, exemplary impact on Hawaii. I want to congratulate you, David, for all of your successes and achievements.
The one common thing that they shared was this ability to make things happen. I think they're going to be so fondly remembered, and they're very deserving of this award. Congratulations, Doc. Congratulations, David.
Without you and Dr. Kelley, we wouldn't have a Hawaii Convention Center. We wouldn't have a tourism authority. We wouldn't have a burgeoning industry here with 220,000 people employed, a $16 billion industry in the state of Hawaii, these small 8 islands in the middle of the Pacific. So you've made a big impact here. I think David would be the first to say that he's been successful in his career, and Richard, I think, would echo the same sentiment, not just because of what they've accomplished, but I think because of who they are. Not just as CEOs and leaders, but as fathers and as husbands.
I'm incredibly proud of both my dad and David. They've taken something that my grandparents started and grown it with those values that were so important. They've cared for their community, they've cared for the people who worked with them, and created this amazing hotel company that has touched lives across the globe.
That was an incredible video. Thank you to everybody who participated in producing that. Good evening. My name is Chuck Kelley, and I am honored to be here tonight for our 2 inductees to the 2019 Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame, Richard Kelley and David Carey. Let's give them a round of applause. I say honored, but I'm also surprised to be here. I didn't expect my life path to take me to this stage tonight, and I'll bet if we asked them, neither Richard or David at one point in their life expected they would be here tonight either. Think about it. Think about a little bit of history. Put yourself, say, 40 years back, somewhere around 1980, and look at what they're doing. My father is helping his parents, Roy and Estelle Kelley, with a collection of 3-star properties in Waikiki. But he's also a doctor. He's a pathologist, a Stanford-trained, Harvard-educated academic pathologist, the type of man who's most comfortable in a lab coat spending all day long looking at cells under a microscope. And David is a Stanford student looking at law school someday who's fallen in love with a beautiful young co-ed, my sister Kathy. And he's working in the hotels thinking about how I can live in Hawaii. I mean, this sounds like the setup to a good joke, doesn't it? I mean, you put a pathologist and an electrical engineer in a room for 40 years, and what do they develop? I'm sure there's a lot of good punchlines out there, but life tells us what they developed. Together, they transformed Waikiki, and they developed a hospitality company stretching halfway around the globe. Amazing. But let me just speak for just a second on the quality of the company that they created. As has been said, they treated everyone like family, or ohana, as we say. They took entry-level employees, often immigrants, offered them tremendous wages, benefits in both union and non-union environments. They created lifetime careers, and those employees, as you saw, stayed through their childbearing years, their grandparent years, and many of them were still there as great-grandparents. Unheard of in a hospitality industry normally recognized for high turnover. An incredible company. And those employees, in turn, they raised their children. Those children became professionals, architects, engineers, real estate agents, politicians, and they are leading Hawaii to this very day. It was a company where, because of the values instilled by Richard and David, every employee endeavored every day to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reason, the first time. Both Richard and David are obviously very strong leaders, principled leaders. They are also ones who often prefer to step back from the limelight and encourage others to be in the limelight, mentoring them from behind. But neither one ever shied from the limelight when necessary. And a real good example of this is the Hawaii Convention Center. There was a time when my father in his travels recognized the need for a world-class convention center in Hawaii. Others in Hawaii didn't see it that way. He needed to convince the entire state this was a worthwhile endeavor. Being academic, he pulled together a bunch of slides and papers and 35mm carousels and went on a mission to tell everybody in the state why we should have a convention center. At first they said, no way, impossible. We don't want to pay for it. But after 10 or more years of persistence by my father, we finally got a world-class convention center. And today he's known around town as the father of the Hawaii Convention Center. Those are just examples of the leadership qualities. But I should also mention that running a hospitality business, it is a 24-hour, 7 days a week job, leaving little time for anything else. But to their credit, both gentlemen managed to carve out time, as Shannon said, for their families and for their communities, giving graciously of both their time and their assets to support causes such as the University of Hawaii, our armed forces, Punahou School, the Ronald McDonald House, and many more. So what I'm trying to say in summary is it just wasn't just a real estate company. It was a great real estate company, a company that improved thousands of lives in Hawaii, a company that made Waikiki a better visitor destination, that made Hawaii a better place, and I would argue, made the world a better place. Congratulations. Congratulations to David and Richard for all that you have accomplished. And now my father is coming to the stage to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you for this warm reception. It means a lot to me and many of my families members who are here tonight. I know that a lot of people worked very hard to bring us together tonight, and I wish to give you my congratulations to the team of professionals at Spire who have made this special moment here. A little history. My two sisters and I were born in Hawaii, as they indicated. And we really enjoyed the time when we were growing up in the post-World War II years. I have many vivid memories of being in the islands then, but one of the memories that I will never forget is the terror that gripped us all on the morning of December 7th, 1941. My family stood on the third floor of the patio at our home there in Waikiki, and we watched these attacking Zeros dive in to a great dark cloud that was over Pearl Harbor, about 10 miles away. And then suddenly the street blew up right in front of us. We never determined whether that was a bomb or an anti-aircraft shell, but it did not matter. We dove for shelter. And when World War II ended, I was just 14 years old. I had experienced the hotel business by working in my father's 50-room hotel, the Islander, that he built in Waikiki during the war, using scrap lumber and little bits of concrete block. The Islander was 5 stories high. And I can tell you that number exactly because I was the bellman on the weekends. I had to carry the bags up. Later on, my parents bought a residential property and several around the Islander Hotel. And he rented them out on a daily basis to middle-class Americans, made it possible so they could come to Hawaii. It was essentially an Airbnb, decades ahead of its time. Now, they did anything they could to keep the prices low. And they provided clean, comfortable rooms and the best service possible. It ended up being a winning combination. And middle-class America did indeed come to Hawaii. They came in droves. For me, working in the hotels during school breaks and summer vacations was a great experience. But I knew early on that I really wanted to be a physician. I was so fortunate to earn my undergraduate degree at Stanford University. It gave me a strong foundation that came to my aid later on. After college, I applied to medical schools at Harvard, Stanford, and the University of Colorado, and I was accepted by all. I asked a physician friend how I should make my choice. Which one should I choose? He shot back, Harvard, go there. The weather there is so bad you won't get distracted by outdoor sports and beach picnics. Well, after spending a couple of years back there, I found he was very right. Although we did used to go down to Cape Cod on weekends, and I can remember taking Kathy and her siblings down there, and we get a lobster, and then bring it back, and we put it into the bathtub without any water. And it used to be fascinating to see that guy go like this trying to get out of the bathtub. Well, anyway, after medical school, I returned to the Bay Area here, and I was an intern at the University of California Hospital up in Parnassus Avenue, not very far from here. My second year, I was down in South San Francisco, the general hospital there, and I went back to Honolulu to work at Queens Hospital. It was an outstanding facility that had become the dream of Hawaii's Queen Emma. She built it for the benefit of the people of Hawaii. Well, while I was getting my education and some experience as a physician, my father continued to build hotels, and my mother was in charge of the basic operations of those hotels. I still laugh at the system my mother devised for managing hotel reservations. She did it all manually. She had a whole set of spindles there, and every reservation got pushed down onto a spindle. And the smart girl she was, she knew that when the reservations pile got up to the second joint in your finger, it was time to stop sell. Well, one hot, humid summer afternoon, I was in the middle of examining some pap smears at Queens Hospital. And my father called, and he said he really needed to talk to me. So I went down there and talked to my father, and he said he really needed my help. He loved building hotels. He didn't enjoy managing them. And he had several hotels at this time. So at that point, I agreed to leave medicine and join the family business, because I knew that my father would not ask me to do that if he didn't really need my help. And he also knew that his plans for the new hotel would upset my mother. So she had been dreaming about going on a cruise around South America for a long time. And guess what? My father insisted that I was the one that was going to go tell my mother that a cruise was going to be postponed. Well, in the mid-1960s, I introduced computers to the company, too. These were just really beginning at the time. And my father had a great antipathy about putting computers everywhere. He called them creations of the devil. Well, I introduced him to the company, and when he ever came to where the computers were, I hid them because I knew he'd go on a tirade about the evils of technology. Well, my mother held on to her spindle system until she was convinced that computers did a much better job and met her standards. And over time, my parents realized that I had jumped into the modern hospitality business with both feet. They understood that I was committed to successfully operating their hotels in a world that was much different from the one that they grew up in. They saw that this part of the business was going to be getting stronger and easier to manage, and they trusted me to do the things that they felt comfortable doing. A big one was expanding the business beyond Waikiki, as David has mentioned. Prior to joining the company, my parents had managed to hire local staff who were very loyal to work in the hotels. And they achieved this by competing or compensating their employees fairly well and always treating them with a great deal of respect. We handed out bonuses at Christmas, but everyone was delivered by hand and a handshake. I knew that we had to do much more than just good compensation and respectful treatment to retain these employees in this increasingly competitive environment. And I was discussing this with my best business consultant, Linda, my wife. And she suggested an idea that played a major role in keeping our hotels well run and prosperous to this day. Linda said that misinformation would likely be a tool used to convince our employees they might be better off somewhere else. And she said that we needed to do a better job in communicating with our employees about our business and our benefits and the industry by itself. And I asked her how we could do this. And she suggested a weekly newsletter directed towards our employees. And she designed the logo for the newsletter, and it eventually became part of the brand for the whole company. In 1986, Linda and I produced the first issue of the Saturday Briefing newsletter, which was distributed hard copy to a couple thousand employees every Saturday. Initially, it was just a one-pager, but then it grew to 6, 12, 14 pages once in a while. And the format changed over the years, and others in the industry asked for copies, as did media and elected officials such as Mufi Hahnemann you saw in the movie there. And it's interesting that Mufi writes his similar newsletter himself these days. But I don't think we missed a Saturday Briefing issue for over 30 years when we sold the company. There are millions of personal reasons to thank my wife, Linda, And I want to especially thank her for her brilliant business ideas and counsel, as well as for her love and support for over 42 years now. As you can see, we started as a mom and pop hotel business with one 50-room hotel in Waikiki. And we managed to remain a family business until nearly 60 years, with hotels in Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Fiji, and they mentioned Mauritius and Maldives, and beyond that. We seem to have had the right talents at different times and strengthened and expanded the company. I'm a very lucky guy, and I have a wonderful family. Many of you have met them here tonight. And I'm so honored to be here with you tonight to accept this award on behalf of my family. Thank you very much, and aloha. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Kelley, on behalf of the board of directors and all of us at Spire, welcome to the Real Estate Hall of Fame. Thank you so much. Congratulations. Congratulations. I'd like to invite David up, please.
Thank you very much, Richard. You know, in my corporate life, one of the things I made sure I didn't do was follow Richard in a speech, but I failed again. So, you know, I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you, Richard. I mean, I really owe the opportunity of being in charge of Outrigger for so many years to you, and it's been a great privilege. It's been a great ride. You know, from the humble beginnings of Roy and Estelle, I mean, it's hard to imagine what they accomplished, when they accomplished it. I mean, can you think about going to the territory of Hawaii in the 20s before the stock market crash and creating something? Then can you imagine that their son then took the company beyond that to the neighbor islands? And then it's been my great pleasure to take the company globally, internationally, in multiple destinations. You know, and I think it's our peak. I think we had something like more than 30 resorts, 4,000 employees in multiple countries around the world. So it's truly a success story. You know, and this is a real estate association, so I would say that, you know, a lot of the commentary you've had has been about the operating company. We were really a real estate company with an operating business stapled to the real estate, but it was the operating company that made our real estate successful. You know, I'd like to take a moment to thank all those employees and managers that got us to the point where we're at. I mean, there are people literally around the world. I've seen a number of them here who were involved in the Outrigger story, and I appreciate them coming. You know, they enabled us to make great contributions to our communities, make millions, literally millions of guests happy. And then we've had the opportunity with Richard and I to build a multi-generational family business platform, which, you know, will continue in its next chapter as we go forward. You know, on a more specific basis, I take great pride in the work we did to create the Waikiki Beach Walk and the Renaissance of Waikiki. When I took over, Waikiki was not going any place. People were beginning to lose faith in Waikiki. But fortunately, we did not. We were able to transform Waikiki and be the catalyst for the renaissance of Waikiki. And if you look at Waikiki today, it's enormously successful in large part for the planning, the investment, and the community work that we were able to do as a company. And the growth internationally, I'm proud of the fact that we took the underpinnings of the Hawaiian culture, which were so important to our business in Hawaii, but when you go to other places like Fiji, Mauritius, and others, the culture is different. But what we were able to do is take those essence of the Hawaiian values and map them using the employee input to create a special service culture that was centered around culture. And culture is so important in business today. I'm not saying that we were the first to make culture a part of the business, but I think we were very much the first to make it work at scale. So I'm very proud of that. On a more personal level, I'm glad to have been involved in the community and be recognized with the role I played in both public and private education and in helping military leaders and family in the state of Hawaii, which is, they do so much for our country. So it's been great in my role as military affairs. But finally, I want to thank my family for the support that they've given, particularly my lovely wife, who was such a star on the video. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Spire. Thank you, Stanford, for giving me the basis to be something special. And thank you to the board for this recognition. Mahalo.
David, thank you so much. Yes. Welcome to the Hall of Fame. Thanks, Wayne. Thank you. That was spectacular. That was a wonderful, wonderful tribute. Family members, Richard and David, thank you so much for agreeing to be honorees. I know it's a lot of work, and we so appreciate all of your efforts and your family and everything that went into those just lovely tributes. We're now going to move on to our third honoree, and to keep with the tradition and keeping it in the family, I'm going to ask Ed's brother, Jay, to come up and give the introduction. Jay?
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you to Spire for putting on this wonderful event and honoring my brother Ed. He's talked about this quite a lot since he got the news on this, and I can tell you he is very excited about this, as we all are. I feel very privileged to have been asked to make this introduction and hope that it's not just because I've known Ed longer than all of you. A little background, I'll start with my mother and father. Both were natives of California, and with our mother's descendants having settled in the Bay Area well before the gold rush. They were high school classmates who began dating at the insistence of my mother's sister. They dated for nearly 10 years before getting married, and were married nearly 10 years before having children. Although this is much more common today, it was quite uncommon then, and our parents began to have a family in their 40s, and Ed and I were clearly surprises. The attention our parents focused on their surprises played a significant role in who we are today. Ed was interested in designing and building things from the start. Let there be no doubt about who in our family inherited all of the creative genes. Ed's desire was to have everything neat and in its proper place, unlike his brother, who wasn't at all bothered by eclectic clutter. Showing his creativity and problem-solving skills at an early age, Ed took a roll of masking tape and pasted it down the middle of our room, making it clear which side was his, which side was mine, and where I was not to go. It was a marvel to watch him design, build, and produce amazing models, structures, paintings, and on and on. He mastered all of this at a very young age and left little doubt about what he truly loved and wanted to do. This is something that never changed in his life. While it was certainly fun to watch his plans play out in the architectural world, it was really all, it all came together for me with his homes. Watching him build 2 homes from scratch, one on a lot that was deemed unbuildable, and completely remodel the other 2 homes left me in awe. Everything was done perfectly, and every nuance of these houses was completely thought through in detail and executed to a T. These houses, like his business designs, demonstrated his creative skills and vision. They also showcased his proclivity to thinking about outside the box, along with his tenacity and passion to get things done. Now, I could stop here, but you'd all be missing the icing on the cake. Perhaps it was our growing up in a household with mature parents who instilled values, but Ed absorbed the lessons well. As modeled for us by our parents, family was always center stage. His two children, Jillian and Ted, are here tonight, and they mean everything to Ed. It's so important that you guys are here. He's always loved people, found ways to instantly engage with them. He treated coworkers, clients, friends, and of course family in a thoughtful and passionate way. Now, before I leave you with the impression that my brother was this passive, loving person, I want to mention that he also had a wild and adventuresome side. He loved skiing and savored black diamond runs. However, the craziest side of his life was his love of motorcycles. He's ridden bikes all over the world and often at very excessive speeds. And yes, for those of you who know Sam Zell, Ed was one of Zell's angels. I'd love to go on, but I think you all get the idea of what a complete and extraordinary person Ed is. And I'd love to now treat you to a tribute video about him. So thank you, and congratulations, bro.
I learned a lot about leadership from my father. I learned that you honor the people that work for you. It's not about ordering them around. It's about showing them what you want to have accomplished and then allowing them to figure out how to do it the best way.
Well, my parents would be just thrilled, and they would be, they'd be so proud of what he's accomplished. As a child, Ed was very focused, and he was almost single-minded in what he loved. He loved anything that had to do with building things, with art, with construction.
My father insisted, engineering young man, we're going to put a man on the moon. And so I knew I was going to go to engineering. Stanford had an excellent engineering school. And they also had mechanical engineering. It's basically product design. Same prerequisites as architecture. And I was recruited by a fraternity and joined the fraternity. My Stanford life did revolve around the fraternity more than anything. Roger and Martha were such close friends all the way through. Roger was a fraternity brother, and Martha was his girlfriend from early on.
He was just always a lot of fun, and I think the thing that struck me is the twinkle in his eye. People with twinkles in their eye, they're always fun.
My brother was the best man in their wedding, and vice versa.
And he's still our best man.
My landlord had a crazy lot on Corinthian Island, so steep that it seemed impossible to build on. The neighbors thought I was nuts and picketed all the meetings I went to.
I went to a planning commission meeting in Tiburon where it was, and before I got the chance to speak, there was this young man who got up and was trying to convince the planning commission that he could build a house on an unbuildable lot, and he in fact convinced him, and he convinced me that he'd be a pretty interesting guy to have join us.
I bumped into him at the bar where we were celebrating this great victory, and he said, "You were at the planning commission tonight?" And I said, "Yes, I was." Well, he said, "That was a great presentation. Why don't you come in and talk to me?"
And so I brought him on, and the rest is history. He's been a tremendous partner to this firm, one of the great leaders of the firm, and a great friend. About 55 years ago, we started this firm with $200 and one opportunity, and have built it to the largest firm in the world. So I'm very proud of that, but I'm really most proud of the people that we've assembled around us.
Most important thing to understand about teams is everybody has different strengths, and you need the amalgam of everybody's talent. And everybody has to respect everyone else and respect what they contribute
I've been with the firm for 38 years. And when I first started with the firm, Ed was running the LA office. And I met Ed and was immediately struck by his incredible, innovative, strategic thinking, how he thought about the world and the future of the world. And he immediately took me under his wing.
I believe that design is one of the most powerful performance tools for an organization you can possibly give them. But you can't tell a client that. You have to show them. We were doing the Delta Airlines terminal at LAX.
I was 25 years old. I just started with the firm. And Ed came over to me and tapped me on the shoulder to say, Andy, why don't you take a shot at designing this airport? And I said, Ed, I've never designed an airport before. And he said, that's okay. Because if you're focused on innovation, you're focused on what great design can do for the experience of a passenger, you'll be able to design one.
So we walked into the airport, a couple of us with clipboards, interviewing passengers. Story I heard over and over. I've been on the beach for a week with my honey. We are tanned and lovely. We get on the plane, we have a couple of umbrella drinks. We get a little drowsy on the way in. We land, we get off the plane. In those days, the ceilings were very low and very flat. They had mercury vapor lights, which is a very bluish light. I got off the plane and I looked at my girlfriend. She looked like a cadaver. So I said, all right, I can fix that.
So I worked 2 all-nighters in a row and came back and showed Ed a bunch of the different designs that I had created. And Ed immediately was taken to one of the designs and said, you know what? You're going to present this to the client. And as a 25-year-old new employee of the firm, I had the opportunity to present to the chairman of the board of Delta Airlines a new concept for a terminal. The terminal still exists today and has won many, many awards. And that's the kind of leadership that Ed instills. He trusts you. He embodies the idea to go for big ideas, to go for big challenges, to solve big, hairy problems in the world. And with that, you can accomplish anything.
Probably my favorite project of all time. The Wilshire Palisades building in Santa Monica sits up on the bluffs overlooking Pacific Ocean. The client was Lawrence Welk. The main wall looking at the ocean faces southwest, worst possible exposure. And Lawrence Welk says, the only thing you've got to do is make this building so that the $1 million view, I don't have to have the drapes drawn every day. I was able to turn the building 45 degrees to the compass rose, so you could have the drapes open all year round and still see the ocean. Lawrence Welk moved in. He was ecstatic. To this day, that building commands the highest rent in the LA basin and still has a waiting list to get in.
Ed is such an innovative thinker. He has changed the face of real estate and design in the world. He's made such a huge, profound difference to people's lives. He was always ahead of his time, and he so deserves this honor and award because he is an icon in the industry.
I started when there were 20 people. When I became president, there were 600 people in 8 offices. 8 years later, when I retired, there were 2,400 people in 25 offices all around the world.
Ed and I met 6 years ago, so we are a late life union, and it's been fantastic.
So Margaret accuses me of being persistent. Yeah, I was persistent, and thank God I was. It's been the most wonderful relationship I could ever imagine.
When I first met Ed, he was very engaging, easy to talk to, very courteous, and a likable guy. But I'd have to say I didn't think he was my kind of person.
She stood me up the first time we were supposed to meet because she'd gone through and read my profile again, realized I was a Republican and she's a Democrat. And she said, oh, I I can't go out with a Republican. Well, I kept telling her, I'm malleable.
He had asked me, have you ever ridden on a motorcycle? I was 67 years old, and I said, no, but sure, I'll give it a try. It was the most thrilling, fulfilling thing I think I had experienced. We'd done 5 countries in Europe, I on the back of a motorcycle.
It is one of the most romantic relationships. They treat each other so well. There's a joyfulness in everything they do. They take care of each other's kids and grandkids, and it's really family.
Family is very important to Ed. He just thinks the world of his kids and his grandkids.
I love my kids so much. They are my closest buddies. I'm so lucky to have run into Don and Susan Clark. Again, right place, right time. I was introduced to Don when I first moved to Reno, and we just hit it off.
He was looking how to get involved, and he was already getting involved with trying to help a trolley get created and a bunch of other things, and he'd only been there a few months.
And so I started with a very casual conversation, kind of introducing him to the concepts. I wasn't 5 minutes into it, and he was just on it, wanting to know more, deeper, and in no time at all, he had an incredible understanding of exactly what we were trying to do.
It's going to be 2,200 residential units, about 600,000 feet of Class A office space. We will build the tallest building in Reno, 40 stories, and it is by far the most sustainable thing I've ever worked on.
This field doesn't always have people who really care about the folks around them as much, and every day I feel as if he makes it better for everybody. And I just want to thank him for that.
Ed, I am so proud of you for this award. There's no one person in the world that I think deserves this award more than you to be in the Hall of Fame at Stanford. You have accomplished so much in your unbelievable career. And the best part about it is yes, you've made a tremendous difference in the design world, you've made a tremendous difference in the profession, but most importantly, you've made a difference in people's lives.
I've always been proud to think your brother who used to build the little toothpick roller coasters when we were growing up has gone to where he was running the largest architectural firm in the world. I think that's an incredible accomplishment.
Congratulations, Ed. This is a wonderful and well-deserved honor. You have performed great work, and you're a wonderful person, and you give back to your community. What more can you ask for?
His long career in architecture and planning and construction make him just an ideal candidate for this honor, and we're really happy to be part of this wonderful celebration.
I'm very not only proud of him, but also grateful that he is able at this point in his life to get this kind of recognition.
I was pretty fearless. I did what came natural, what I'd learned working in the bakery, watching my father. I want to be remembered as a role model for the values that I hold. The same way that I remember my father for the way he treated people. Do you tell the truth? Do you value other people's truths? Do you live with those values through your life? I always did. I've lived a wonderful life. It's been so much fun.
Wow, that was amazing. I'm Bill Worthington. I'm a fill-in for Bill Tooley, who is going to give this talk. But Bill took ill this afternoon, and I got recruited at the last minute to do this part of the presentation. However, I feel that I actually kind of belong here in a lot of ways. For one thing, I grew up in a in a house with a brother who was an architect, an older brother, and everything Jay said is what I experienced. I was the one who didn't get it and never could. I had my first real estate experience with Bill Tooley, and Bill Tooley offered me an opportunity to build a building in San Francisco on his behalf, and we hired Gensler, and I got to know Ed. And so that was, my foray into real development and so forth. And so everything that's going on in this video, I feel a part of in a lot of ways. And Ed and I have stayed in touch, as Bill and I have. And so I'm thrilled to be here and have this opportunity to just say a few more words about Ed. And by the way, Bill Tooley was an honoree of this, I think you probably know, a couple of years ago. So that's something he should be very proud of. So the building that sort of Bill and Ed got most connected with was the building they built, the one that he just showed for Lawrence Welk. And that was one that Bill Tooley's extremely proud of, and it's been, I wasn't actively involved in that one, but I was in the organization when it was all done, and it's a terrific building. So Ed's career started, as I understand it, at Stanford in the architectural design program, which is part of the engineering school, which he talked about a little bit earlier, where they seek to integrate engineering and architecture in ways that blend innovative design with cutting engineering technology. And, that so much says Ed, because what I do know of him is he's very engineering minded, and I think that's been a big part of his success. He finished his architectural study at the University of Pennsylvania, where the noted architect Louis Kahn was in residence. And Ed returned to the Bay Area and was discovered by Art Gensler, as I indicated, and the very story, what Bill was going to tell, the very story that was in there, that how Art and Ed met each other when Ed made a very impressive presentation on that property. So. It's pretty clear that this is a very special guy in terms of design and technology and so forth. But he also did so much more than that. Watching my brother try to run architecture as a business has taught me a lot. It's a very difficult business. Your clients don't always treat you right, and the city doesn't always treat you right, and there's a lot of challenges, and it's not easy to be really successful in that as a business. I have that on direct experience. But Art Gensler and Ed really created a company that's extremely unique in the sense that they really, first of all, they started with interiors, which is a part of the business that goes on all year round and all seasons and all different financial things, because even when the market's in a downturn, you still got to change your facilities around to accommodate the new situation. And so, they had a basis in doing interiors, but then they also tied that together with doing the exterior. And one of the things I learned in working with these gentlemen is that there's different perspectives. Like Ed said, that you got to look for everybody's strength. Well, one of the just very basic things, the work that I did with Bill and Ed, we would have different architects for the outside of the building and the inside of the building, because there's a natural tension between what's important from the outside for all kinds of reasons and what's important on the inside, and that having that tension is how you get a much better solution so that the building really works as a whole, and you're not sort of out designing a really beautiful outside and then try to move tenants into the building and nothing works right because the dimensions aren't right and the space doesn't quite work. And so Gensler went from interiors into doing virtually the whole building, and then began to grow until it really became a global company. And I don't know any other firm that can claim that kind of a record. And I think Ed's involvement it was paramount in bringing that all about. Not that Art was not important, but I think Ed was the partner that Art needed to be as successful as they turned out to be. Ed apparently has said that what he learned from his father is whatever you do, be the best at it. And he really took that into his philosophy of how to do his business. And he, I guess it's a form of engineering to say, how do you build an organization that continues to grow in value over time? I mean, that's a puzzle to be solved, along with all the things you solve while you're executing the business. You also have to have the business really work. And so it's not just great design, but it's great management and great success in doing all kinds of projects for all kinds of clients in all kinds of cultures all over the United States. I mean, amazingly, they've expanded in South America, Europe, Middle East, China, Asia, but they also had the management committee that allowed the senior management to manage all of that and be successful in all those different places, which I think it's difficult enough if you just have your main office in Chicago or something, but I mean, to have all the rest of it around the world is really a challenge. And not only because it's a lot of distance, it's also a 24-hour business when you're doing that you're always doing something someplace. But that was a phase, Art and Ed, and a very successful one. But Ed is capable of so much more. He decided to retire in 2006 from Gensler, wrote a book called Long Cycle Strategies for a Short Cycle World, which sets in clear terms the management approach that he has developed in his career, distilling much of what he had learned through his own experience and providing a clear blueprint for the success of the business of architecture or any business. I recommend the book. This is Bill speaking at the moment, because I haven't read it, but Bill Tooley's read the book, and he recommends it to anyone interested in the subject of enlightened management and leadership. It's a wonderful read. Now, I don't know how many architects, become very skilled at those kinds of things. I think this is probably a fairly unique book. So today, the Gensler firm has 48 offices in 26 countries and a personnel count of over 6,000 employees, which really speaks to the success of all of that. And so the other part of what Bill was going to talk about is Ed's sort of fun side, which is the motorcycles and the new bride that he has, and that also sets him aside. I mean, Ed and I have been able to stay in touch over the years in various ways, and he always has great stories to tell about what is he doing now, and he loves the Ducati Italian motorbikes, and he likes to do it all over the world. And I had a bike for a couple of years in college, but I decided that was not a good. I want to fly in an airplane, and I don't want to ride a motorcycle. I decided I'm not skilled enough to do either of those things. But he's made a career out of doing that as well. And so he gives him a kind of a getaway adventure balance in his pressure to balance against the pressures of work, and at the same time satisfy his deep need to experience and learn more about the world around him. So it's my pleasure, as well as Bill Tooley's pleasure, we're here to have Ed come up to the podium and be honored for all the work he has done, and not only for himself, but for all the people who have learned from being exposed to his brilliant mind.
Thank you, Bill. That's very kind. Let me start out with a couple of things just to clarify. I turned 75 this year, and I stopped riding motorcycles. Not that I have ever hurt myself. The only time I've ever hurt myself has been on skis. And I got a replacement shoulder, a replacement hip. It's all from skiing, not from motorcycling. I had a great time motorcycling, and it was a great adventure for me. First thing, this to me is a statement of gratitude to the people that have guided me and helped me through my life. My father was the first one. He had a bakery in Hayward, and he was also a pretty adventurous guy. All he wanted to do was fly. And so when Dole Pineapple was going to sponsor the first nonstop flight to Hawaii, he figured out a way to take an old Model T, which still sits in my brother's house, a Model T truck, 1926, and make a deal with the vendors at this carnival at the airport, which was Alameda Air Station now, to deliver hot dog buns and hamburger buns. But he had more room in the truck. So he filled it with pastries and bread and so forth, and started knocking on doors in Alameda. From that grew a house-to-house delivery system that went from Monterey to Sacramento. And he just built a huge business. So I had a great role model as a young man. Most important thing, though, was how he dealt with his employees. They were family. He treated them with respect and honor, and they worked hard for him. I was amazed at the relationship he had with his employees, and that's what taught me leadership skills that I've employed my whole life. I respect him tremendously for that. A couple other things happened to me along the way. When I was in high school, and by the way, I went to Hayward High, which our mascot was the Hayward High Farmers. We couldn't be the Falcons or the something else's, but we were the Farmers. And it was a farm school in those days. I still remember looking down from my chemistry class, and there'd be pens set up in front of the gymnasium where people would bring their goats and their pigs and the little sheep, and that's the kind of school it was. Well, I was one of the few students that was selected for the American Field Service, which was a foreign exchange student program. And one of the things that was most remarkable about that is when I was selected, I was studying German in school, and they put me in Austria. Now, that's unusual. Usually they put you somewhere where you don't know the language. Well, fortunately, my grandmother spoke German, and so I was pretty facile in German. But one of the things that I was most interested in was Americans love European cities and villages. Why? So I got a chance to be up close and personal. I had my sketchbook and ink pens, and I would do sketches in these town squares. And people would come by, and usually they were Americans, and they'd talk to me about what I was drawing, and I'd sell them something. I need some money, so I'd sell them some sketches. But what I learned was what it was that made up a town or a village that made people feel good. And that was a very important influence in me wanting to be an architect. So by the time I think I was 12 years old when I told my grandmother I was going to be an architect. And she told my father. Well, this was the era of the movie, let's see, what was it? Let's see, The Graduate. You all remember The Graduate? Plastics, young man, plastics. That's the future. Well, he got all his buddies together and said, architecture, very high risk, low reward profession. Engineering, we're going to put a man on the moon, and that's where you want to be. And I thought, oh, I don't know, that's not me. But I dutifully was accepted at Stanford, which I was thrilled about. I think I was only the third or fourth student out of Hayward High School that was ever accepted at Stanford. So I was proud of that. And I entered the engineering program and then did a parallel with architecture. But I had a great time. Stanford was a marvelous institution, and it was an institution of learning that gave me breadth. And that was something I craved. I was always learning something new that was not akin to things I was interested in. It was not a funnel school. This was a broad-ranging school, and I loved that. So Stanford was terrific. I ended up back at University of Pennsylvania, which was also very interesting because they gave me a fellowship to go to Europe for a summer, all expenses paid. What's wrong with that? I got a letter one day in the mailbox, and I was in a old house that a couple of my fraternity brothers and I rented. They were in the business school. I was in architecture. And I got this letter from the dean, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done wrong now? I opened the letter. It says, you've been awarded the E. Lewis Dales Traveling Fellowship to Europe. Oh, what's that for? So I went down to the school and graciously accepted the check. But it gave me an additional opportunity to really observe towns and cities that were built for people. I mean, if you remember America in the 60s and 50s and 60s, we built shopping centers, and they were horrible. They were just not friendly places. There weren't cafes and places to sit outside. There weren't benches. There weren't trees. They were just shopping centers. They were machines to sell things. It was a sad commentary on what design should be about. So I learned a great deal there. The other thing that just amazed me, when I got back from architecture school at Penn, all I needed to do was go to work for an architect. I had to get my apprenticeship with under a licensed architect in order to apply for my own license. Well, it was a recession. Nobody was hiring. So I went to work for a developer in Marin County, which turned out to be one of the best experiences I ever could have had because he was his own contractor, he had his own sales office, he was the developer, he financed the project and so forth, and he hired me, and all I had to do was design the houses, go down to the city to negotiate. This is very steep land up in Terra Linda, which is San Rafael, across from the Civic Center in Marin County. And all I had to do was to negotiate to be able to do the grading we wanted to do with the city. Oh, these were invaluable lessons that I was able to apply when I finally was practicing architecture. So the experiences I've had and the gratitude I have for the people that took me under their wing and helped me to learn what this profession was really all about were terrific. Now, Art tells a story of meeting me at this city council meeting. Reality is, we met in a bar about a block away from the city hall. I had a civil engineer that was working with me on the subdivision. He would lower me. I was on a bosun's chair. This lot was so steep. The flattest part of the lot was 45 degrees. It's 1-to-1. I mean, you can't climb even on that. And so he's lowering me down, hooked to an oak tree in poison oak. I got poison oak all over my body. And I'm holding the pole so he can take sightings to get elevations to draw a topographical map of the site. And so the civil engineer is with me. The lawyer who figured out how to do well, the property lines were drawn for that particular site in 1915, and these lots were given away with newspaper subscriptions to the Examiner. I mean, that's about the degree of sophistication of the diagrams of the site. And so the property lines actually went down into the middle of Main Street across from the City Hall, and the property was the middle of the street. So we had to do this land swap with the city. So we had a rather difficult proposition to overcome in order to get agreement. So the lawyer, the civil engineer, and my landlord, we all went to the local bar to celebrate this victory, where we had pickets outside with signs, "You're going to kill somebody if you let them build on that lot." It was horrifying, but the city council passed it. And this big guy on the bar stool kept bumping into me. Well, that was hard. And I turned to him and I said, "You know, if you'd like, I'll move to the bar stool at the other end of the bar." And he says, "Wait a minute, no, you were in the city council meeting tonight," and that was how our conversation began. Well, Art lived in Tiburon, as did I. We would take the boat, the ferry boat, to San Francisco every morning, have coffee and donuts, and then have a cocktail on the way home. And we got to talk a lot about what the future of this profession should be. We came up with a very simple premise, and that was that design is a performance enhancement tool. When I say performance enhancement, let me give you some examples. The Lawrence Welk building is a classic because in that it was about being able to lease the space and have it in demand over time. And Lawrence Welk had the right idea. You gotta have your $1 million view such that you can see it. You can't be drawing drapes in front of it all day. We did that. The compass rose is 45 degrees to the street grid in Santa Monica. We turned the building 45 degrees so it faced due south, 30-inch overhang, 7-foot head on the window, and you never had sun coming in. And of course, the entire north face, the other long face, you never needed drapes there. It was a terrific building. So Sam Zell, by the way, bought that building. And I remember sitting with, we had won an Urban Land Institute award for that building. And they're all about economics, of the performance of the building. And sure enough, his property manager is there, and she's telling me that, oh no, since we've owned that building, we've had a waiting list to get in, and it commands the highest rent of anything we own in all of Southern California. And I said, well, that's very successful. Then the public school district in Santa Monica had an architectural awareness program, and they asked, these were fifth graders, they asked them, what's your favorite building in Santa Monica? It was the shipbuilding, because it looks like a cruise ship sitting up there on the bluffs. That was their favorite building. I was thrilled. That was a bigger honor than anything else in my life. So we had some very good times. Art, I want to thank you in particular for having the faith in me to let me do the things you let me do, because we really did create quite an organization. And by the way, you all should know, that was an organization built with no mergers, no acquisitions, one person at a time. And Art was smart enough to study ESOPs, an employee stock ownership plan for an organization. So there's no public ownership of the firm. It is owned by the people that walk in and walk out of the door every night. And that's part of what's made it very successful. People feel an ownership role in the thing they've built. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all very much for being here tonight. And thank you to all of my colleagues at Gensler and other people I've worked with over the years. You've made a wonderful life for me. Thank you very much.
Ed, on behalf of the Board of Directors, welcome to the Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes our program tonight, the ceremony, and thank you to our inductees, our honorees, and their families for all being here. Thank you all for being here. It's been an extraordinary night. I hope you enjoyed it. Come back next year, drive safely, and thank you for supporting Spire. Thank you very much. Good night.